about this work in more detail. Thank you. So we'll call Henry on up and he will tell you a little bit about the Mayor's Office of Innovation.
All right, good evening folks. As LaShonda said, I'm Henry Fitz. I'm the Director of the Mayor's Office of Innovation at the City of Rochester. Next slide, please. So a little bit about my team. We are a small team that was formed in 2015. We're a centralized office in the Mayor's office reporting to Mayor Lovely Warren. And we can be deployed by the Mayor to address critical civic issues, as well as work with internal departments and external partners to develop programs, do data analysis, make sure we're making great data-driven decision-making. Our initial focus area has been the Rochester Monroe Anti-Poverty Initiative and Anti-Poverty Strategies, and we've been working closely with them for a long time. So, a little bit about this buzzword innovation. What do we mean by this? Well, to us, innovation is a problem-solving approach, which starts with a firm understanding of the problem at hand. So we truly believe, before you start throwing around potential solutions, you need to dig into the problem. And we do that in these areas. First, look at available data, census data, city data, data that we collect to inform us on the statistics and the facts about an issue. But data is only one piece of the picture. We need to supplement that with actually speaking to residents, to experts who deal with these issues each day, who live these experiences. And we do that through surveys, focus groups, and things of that nature. And then finally, we do take a look at current historical research, what other cities are doing around these issues, what's being successful, what's actually been tried in Rochester in the past, why things may have failed, and what we can learn from all this as we begin to develop new solutions today. Next. So again, I think we covered the problem very, very well, and I'm very glad that our community is really up to speed with the severity of the poverty issue, because it is dire. We are now number 4 in the United States for the top cities in terms of poverty rate, and compared to our peers, mid-sized cities, we are number 1 across the board for poverty rate, for child poverty rate, and for extreme poverty rate for families living below 50% of the poverty threshold. Very, very severe situation. And in addition to the severity, one of Rochester's unique factors is the concentration of poverty, and that we have a large contiguous area of our city where over 40%, and in some cases over 60% of residents are living in poverty in certain pockets. It's an area that visitors and even longtime residents really might not see unless they're really trying to, and that's part of our problem, that this area is dislocated and removed from areas of opportunity, that there are very few jobs, there's very little investment, and it's a really tough situation to address through traditional strategies. So, as I mentioned, my team's been working closely with the Rochester Monroe Anti-Poverty Initiative for some time now. We lend our capacity, especially in these areas of data analysis, mapping, program design, and evaluation, so that we know that our MAPI and our partners are making sound, data-driven decisions, that we're launching programs with the capacity to collect and analyze data and improve their effectiveness, and that we can measure our success over the long term. And we're redefining the way our community works together in terms of collective impact. We are all not just doing our own things, we're actually all coming together under a larger vision, a larger strategy. We're sharing, we're creating shared goals, we're measuring ourselves consistently, and our activities are mutually reinforcing and hopefully not duplicating efforts. And we meet very, very frequently. Next. So one of the first contributions my team helped make to our MAPI and our community was in this geographic focus. We knew that with the concentration of poverty that we face, we need to have a concentrated approach. We need to pick an area of the city that we can start and that we can use as a testing ground for some of our new strategies, so we can measure them rigorously to know if they're working before we scale them up to the rest of our community. And we helped lead the data-driven analysis that looked at a lot of different data factors, and essentially, as Tori and LaShonda have mentioned, we looked for an area that had its issues, had poverty, had vacancy, crime, but also had a lot going for it at the same time in terms of assets and things to build upon. And that analysis led us to the selection of these neighborhoods, the Markview Heights, Beechwood, Emma, Bensonhurst neighborhoods, which is what we call the catchment area, the pilot district, depending on who you talk to. And as you see, Connected Communities is working in Beechwood and Emma, and then the rest of our community really is focusing all these neighborhoods collectively, and we're planning to focus energy and investment and measurement in these neighborhoods over the next several years. So as soon as we selected the area, we also wanted to make sure we did a deep dive into the data on these neighborhoods specifically, so we know what are some of those unique factors about these neighborhoods as we begin to tailor our strategies. So we looked at some of the census data, and when census data didn't go far enough, we even helped implement a door-to-door survey, which asked our residents directly about their perceptions to barriers to employment, to how access to services, things of that nature. We found some really important findings that have really helped steer the work of my team as well as our community partners. Some of the highlights I have listed here, of those folks who are employed in these neighborhoods, less than 5% are working in these neighborhoods. Over 50% are commuting out to jobs in the suburbs. Really reinforcing transportation is a critical barrier that we need to address. We also saw that over 1,000 adults in poverty in these neighborhoods had some college experience. So people are taking steps to improve their lives. They're taking steps to lift themselves up, but there are still barriers that they're facing to getting jobs and advancing. Among the door-to-door survey results, I think some community members were surprised to see the amount of smartphones that residents had, that almost 80% had a smartphone, and opens up opportunities for ways we can interact and get information to people. Mental health and addiction services were the biggest issue that people felt in their neighborhoods, as well as the biggest service gap in these neighborhoods. So I'm going to touch briefly on a few of the projects in which my team's involved, and each of these could probably warrant an hour presentation, so I'm going to try and breeze through and we can come back if we need to. So first is one we are working on closely with our MAPI as well as the implementing partners. This is the Bridges to Success program, which is one of our MAPI signature first wave programs. It's being implemented by Catholic Family Center, ABC, and Community Place. And my team's involved on the evaluation side, partnering with MIT and Notre Dame University on the evaluation, which is being structured very rigorously so we can capture the information and then present how effective this program is. And today, the funding landscape is shifting towards intense focus on outcomes and rigorous evaluation. And we know that if we can do that, we can show this program is successful, we open ourselves up for sustainable funding sources and new types of financing for programs. As Tori mentioned, this program is intended to help serve the head of household by providing them supports on their journey towards economic self-sufficiency and independence. And there's two models being piloted simultaneously. One is a professional mentor model where they have head of household has a life coach who works with them to set goals and connect them with services to meet those goals. The other is a peer mentoring model where heads of household come together and support each other and set goals together and hold each other accountable. And we're going to be launching those together and comparing them. Both of these programs are currently going through under active recruitment, recruiting from those same target neighborhoods, which we showed you before. And this is just a zoom in on a few of the evaluation details. Some of the key metrics that we're going to be tracking are change in earnings for our participants, employment status, public benefits utilization, and we're measuring those based on surveys of the participants, in-program scaling tool that they use to set goals, as well as data that we're going to be able to capture from some of our state and local government partners in terms of benefits utilization, as well as from the Department of Labor, things like earnings from unemployment insurance. And after a long period of time, we're going to have some very, very rigorous data to know if this program is working or if it's not. And if it's not working, we'll know a lot about why not and how we can tweak it to make sure it does. And then on to a few of the city's own projects underneath the RMAP umbrella. The first is a transportation pilot program that we started in late 2016. It's a commuter van pool program. You can think of it a lot like a carpool, except all the riders in this program share a vehicle that's provided to them by our contracted van pool turnkey provider, V-Ride. They're a subsidiary of Enterprise. They own the vehicle, they manage the ride matching, the insurance, and the payment system. So all the folks can meet up at a library or a place where they can keep the vehicle, get in the van, they take it to work, they work there at their shift at a place, potentially a mall or another employment site that's not well served by the bus system. At the end of their shift, they all come back to the vehicle, take the vehicle back, and it lives in the neighborhood at night. And they share the costs, and the city is helping subsidize this pilot through our funding sources, making sure we're launching it small, measuring it rigorously, making sure it works, and we're hoping to scale it up coming this summer and this fall. And the great thing about it is it's financially sustainable through the same funding sources that fund the bus system. After 2 years, we get paid back based on the mileage that the van travels. And because it's actually a lot less expensive to run a van with 7 people in it than a bus with 7 people in it, it actually, financially, the model works quite well. All right, next one is our market-driven community cooperatives initiative. Again, in some of the RMAP initial data analysis and community planning sessions identified this lack of jobs located in our most distressed neighborhoods, a lack of access to opportunity. And the mayor asked me and our team to look at innovative solutions that were having success, specifically creating jobs in distressed communities. And we found a model in Cleveland, Ohio that has been successful doing this, working in partnership with these anchor institutions like RU of R, RAT, Rochester Regional Health, these large place-based institutions that are rooted in our community. That part of their mission is to benefit our community, and we know they're going to be here for a long time. But they also are now becoming our largest employers, and they have a lot of economic activity flows through those organizations. They buy a lot, they spend a lot. So they're actually good, reliable purchasers that we can build businesses around, and that's what they did in Cleveland. They built 3 worker-owned businesses that have a mission to hire from distressed neighborhoods that serve their institutions. They have an industrial laundry facility that does linens and sheets for the hospitals and hotels. They have a large-scale greenhouse that does herbs and microgreens. And then they have an energy services company that installs LED lights and solar panels for their energy needs. They have over 110 employees and continue to grow, and each of the businesses is profitable. So we set out to replicate this model in Rochester, actually now over 2 years ago through an initial feasibility study. And we are excited to announce that we've just recently launched our first business, which is a similar green energy construction company that's doing its first jobs at Rochester General Hospital, helping retrofit their LED lights in their parking garages and moving next into the hospital itself. We also have other additional contracts lined up in the solar space. Importantly, each of these businesses is launched underneath an umbrella nonprofit corporation, which continues to own and support these subsidiary businesses. And on the board of that nonprofit are those key anchor institution partners who continue to be long-term purchasers and continue to work with us to find additional business opportunities. We also have residents from the Community Advisory Council, neighborhood residents, the funders, business community, to help us make sure that... No worries. Well, we're on a time limit now, right? But yeah, great board that we've assembled to help make sure the businesses we launch are going to be successful, and that they help us find additional opportunities and funding opportunities to continue to grow the impact of this work. We're projected to hire up to 14 in this first year of Enterock, our first business, and have the next businesses already in the pipeline. Importantly, another overlap I like to always continually connect back. The participants in our Mappy Bridges to Success program who are going through that program, who are taking steps to advance themselves towards self-sufficiency, are some of those are going to get priority hires into these jobs. So all these initiatives and programs connect very, very importantly.
That's right.
Okay, last one is our Kiva Microfinance program. Again, looking at the data, we see that very, very few business loans are made in our most distressed neighborhoods, and especially for small and micro businesses, access to capital is very, very difficult because people's credit, business credit and personal credit are often intertwined. People may not have a credit history. They may not have the skills to go to a very traditional bank to secure a loan. And this is an issue across the country that cities are seeing. Thankfully, there is a great partner out there called Kiva who is helping bring crowd-funded loans through a great platform to cities across the United States. And we helped found a chapter of Kiva here in Rochester, administered through the city, and our business development team built right into our existing suite of services for businesses. So instead of a traditional business loan where you need to supply credit score, cash flow, a lot of hard numbers, instead of that traditional underwriting process, Kiva looks at what they call social underwriting and different measures of trustworthiness and risk of their borrowers. Instead of looking at those numbers and being a firm cutoff, Kiva looks at how do people in your personal network trust you? Would they trust you with their money? If they do, that's a pretty good measure of trustworthiness. And so Kiva does that. Basically, you can write a business plan, come to the our Kiva office. If you need additional support services, we'll help connect you with a variety of already existing local nonprofits that help people do business plans and help develop their ideas. And when they're ready, come back to Kiva, submit an application, post your business plan. And before you can access the millions of users who use the Kiva Online's platform, you go through a personal fundraising session where you need to secure somewhere between 15 and 25 personal connections, $25 from each of them. And they find that that is the single biggest step that helps screen out risky borrowers. Because if your aunt, your dad, your neighbor doesn't trust you with $25, why should the internet? So they found when they implemented that step, their risk really plummeted, and they now have over 89% repayment rate across the U.S. So the city, for qualifying businesses, the city matches online lenders dollar to dollar to help each of those businesses raise their money faster and quick and easier, which is great. And so far we've loaned over $130,000 to over 24 businesses, 3 of which are located in our target neighborhoods. All right. And Kiva is actually one in which you can get involved very directly. If you're not already a Kiva user, I really encourage you to go to kiva.org and create an account. It's very easy. And go on there, search Rochester, New York, see if there's any businesses that are currently fundraising, and consider making a loan, $25 or more. It's very easy, very user-friendly. It's all done through PayPal for the lender as well as the business. And if you're connected with businesses yourself, help refer businesses to us, potentially be a trustee, mentor, and guide businesses as they take a journey through the Kiva process. It's a really important role. All right.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you very much for the invitation to be here. It's been a few years since I've been in front of the League of Women Voters, and I've always enjoyed being here, and thank you very much, not only for being here tonight, but for all that you do to keep the civic presence in our community going so strong on nights like this. I'm Vinny Esposito. I'm the Executive Director of the Finger Lakes Regional Office of Empire State Development, which is the state's economic development agency. It also has a dual role where I'm the Executive Director of the Finger Lakes Regional Economic Development Council. So you've heard from 3 excellent speakers tonight, 3 partners, people we're working with as part of our efforts to reduce poverty. My job is to try to give you some sense of how the state is playing a role in this as a partner. primarily through the Finger Lakes Regional Economic Development Council, and give you some context, and then obviously get to questions so you can get all the things we talked about answered that don't seem to make much sense. But hopefully you're starting to see where the alignment really comes into play. So if you don't mind, we'll continue right into this. And I sort of always start these presentations as a state employee and one who's appointed by the governor, contractually obligated to mention him in everything we do, but especially when it comes to upstate economic development and addressing poverty. What you have on here are just a few things since he came into office in 2011, where he's really tried to change the paradigm of upstate New York, where we faced decades of stagnation and decline in some cases in economic development, and of course, trends and statistics of our poverty situation going also in the wrong direction. So in the last few years, you've seen major state initiatives unfold. I'm going to talk about a couple of them, and these are in addition to some of the other things, some of the other policy efforts the state has taken a leadership role on. You may have heard of things like raising the minimum wage, most recently things like free college tuition in SUNY schools, and several other things at a policy level, in addition to just the local efforts where the governor is really leading, and I want to make sure people have an opportunity to see those things. So we'll keep going right into it. The Finger Lakes Regional Economic Development Council, hopefully by now you know, is a group appointed by Governor Cuomo of stakeholders based in this region, and the way I like to describe them is they're the primary advisory board for the greater Rochester region to the state on all things economic. Their primary job is to develop the regional strategic plan that we try to implement at a local level, and then identify the priorities for state funding to implement and reach the goals identified in the strategic plan. And it's a model that didn't exist before Governor Cuomo, where the region is given a stronger voice through the stakeholders being business owners, labor leaders, university leaders, community partners at nonprofit organizations, having a more direct voice into the decisions that Albany makes. It's a different paradigm. It's one that has its pluses and minuses, but has really changed the nature of which each region can sort of take a stake in its own future and ask Albany to help in that. And that's what the council is all about, and that's what the work we've been doing for the last several years. So if you continue. One of the things I really want to talk about is what the council is doing to help in our community. What you see here is a lot more than just poverty. The Regional Economic Development Council has a big job. It's to deal with the entire regional economic environment. And what you see here is the structural framework, what we call our house, that is our strategic plan. So 2 years ago, the council created a new regional economic plan that is visualized right here. It was done as part of the major competition for the Upstate Revitalization Initiative, which was commonly called the Hunger Games, wherein 3 upstate regions won a commitment of $500 million to their region over the next 5 years for implementation and growing their economy through focused investment. This was the plan that won our region one of those $500 million commitments. And the things I want to point out for this forum are noteworthy, and that at the top, you see the goals that exist in almost any economic development program: growing jobs, driving private investment, and growing regional wealth. That's basic economic development stuff. But what is new and different is this regional council, because it is affiliated and aligned and partnered with the community's anti-poverty efforts, added poverty reduction as a primary goal. And that's one we take seriously now in all of the economic development initiatives and decisions we make going forward. And then within that framework, you see the industries that you might have heard a lot about in the news. I'm not going to cover them now, where we're investing a lot of our dollars. But then you also see in the bottom left what we call pathways to prosperity. It's an expanded vision of workforce development. You know you need a skilled and educated workforce to grow your economy, but we need to think bigger than just retooling or retraining or sending kids to college. From cradle to career, to make sure that everyone can participate in some level of the skills gap that exists in our economy, to be productive and move towards self-sufficiency, as Henry and others have talked about. And that's where the council really starts to play in this conversation, and why I'm at the table in so many conversations and what we're doing to fund some of the things that have already been mentioned. So if you continue. I don't need to really oversee what RMAPI is. Hopefully you've got a sense of that now. That's why we're all here. But the council is a participant. It is a partner. It is an organization involved in the collective impact model that RMAPI is driving, so you can keep moving forward. We've also covered in Tori's presentation the basic sort of structural framework of what RMAPI is doing, the guiding principles, and then the 3 primary areas of focus to start. Again, you're going to see how the council comes in if we continue. And so you see here on this page what was in that strategic plan that was done in 2015 that won the $500 million is one of the pages that addresses how the regional council is going to play in helping our region's anti-poverty efforts. And you start to see a very familiar pattern, which is a Venn diagram of concentric circles, where there's overlap. Because obviously everything we're doing in the Economic Development Council, whether it be photonics or agriculture, isn't necessarily an anti-poverty strategy. And everything the Anti-Poverty Initiative is doing, particularly when it gets into areas of things like mental health and social service, isn't really economic development, but there is a very large and very significant and very important overlap. And that's where the council comes in as one of the partners you saw in Tori's map that helps with this. And so if you go to the next slide, I'll start to define it a little further, and you'll start to hear some of the terms you've heard tonight come together and maybe get a better sense of how they fit together. So here now you see everything stripped away into a much more basic sense. You have the major initiative the governor put in place for the regional council in addressing our economic development at a regional level. You see everything REMAPI is doing as a collective impact model in our economy, and then you put it together where we've identified this pathways to prosperity, sort of this term we're using as part of the Finger Lakes Forward Council and the Finger Lakes Forward Plan to move forward. And if you go to the next slide, you start to see a lot more detail. And I know this is a little hard to read, but you'll start to get a sense of where things fit and where they don't, and how some of the funding comes into play from that $500 million, as well as other state sources, which are considerable and playing a role here. And so you start to see, if we strip away, where the overlap becomes in the pathways to prosperity, how there are some things that fit within the anti-poverty work, and you start to see some of these other terms that you've heard a lot about. Things like the One Community Plan at the top, which is the STAR. These are the 4 primary areas, the 4 priorities that the council and the community have identified as the first places the state should invest money to start to attack this problem. You've heard from a few of them. Adult mentoring, what is now Bridges to Success, the pilot program the Catholic Family Center is helping to implement, is something the regional council funded. Youth mentoring. A Hillside Work Scholarship Connection, a long-time successful program in this community to help at-risk youth get jobs and get mentoring, is something that was funded by the Regional Council. Skills training expansion in the STEM fields at Eastman Business Park, a place of enormous focus of the Regional Economic Development Council. They're going to have a new training center on a bus line at AVP, specific for people who want to get into those advanced manufacturing photonics jobs, funded by the Regional Council. And you start to see the ways in which these things overlap. And then you see this thing called the Prosperity Fund, where we are also leveraging private dollars from this community and other national foundations to match the state dollars to make those dollars go farther, which is one of the economic development strategies we employ in any kind of deal that we do. And then you see the other things we're doing, the Empire State Poverty Reduction Initiative, which was then the governor taking the thing he created in Rochester as its sort of pilot, a task force to focus on poverty in this community where we were most ready to address it, taking those lessons statewide. And you can just see how they start to overlap in a way that starts to make sense, because one of the greatest challenges we have is you've heard so many things tonight already from these 3 speakers, your head's probably spinning already. The people who are most directly involved in this have the same problem. There is so much good happening in this community, so many people doing the right thing. We all need to get organized and together and aligned in a way that is more impactful, so that we don't say anymore, we are program rich and result poor. We start to put together those programs and those efforts and do them smarter. And that's what this is all about, and that's one of the ways the Regional Council is coming to be into helping with that. In the 2 other examples, Tori also mentioned sort of tangible ways the council is helping in addition to those specific anti-poverty programs, is raising awareness among business leaders. Doing what we now have is an anti-poverty impact statement. So if you apply to the Regional Council for funding, you are asked to fill out a questionnaire that tells this council, and by extent this community, what your project will do to help the goal of reducing poverty by 15% in 50 years. How are you addressing those guiding principles and the primary barriers? That's a level of education and awareness that isn't necessarily talked about as explicitly and as directly as it needs to be. We need to raise that bar. The council is helping to do that. And we have seen companies step up, most notably Genesee Brewery, in a direct way to make commitments to hire people impacted by poverty as a result of those efforts, and get an extra incentive through the Regional Council to do so that maybe they can meet the extra training burden, the extra transportation burden, the extra childcare burden that might be keeping the people they want to hire from getting a job and staying in that job long-term and succeeding. This is the way we're sort of integrating and doing our role at the Regional Council to work through the collective impact sort of model that REMAPI has set up and is driving. So I think that's the basis of my remarks. If you go to the next slide. I'd just like to sort of end with a couple really powerful notes. The governor was here in November to announce some of the initial funding through the Regional Council for those programs I mentioned. And there's been obviously a lot written, for those of you who've been paying attention, about how this is not something where any one of us, any organization, any service provider, any government is going to solve this on their own. It has to be us together taking the bull by the horns, which this community has been doing and is doing in a smart way so that this can be sustainable. It's not just about funding new programs, it's about doing it in a more coordinated way to restructure the system so that it's person-focused and results-oriented, and that together we have to do it in any way everybody can contribute. And that's why you see businesses contributing the way they're doing, the council doing it the same way. And it's encouraging to see, even though we have not yet started to move the needle on the really terrible statistics in our community, we are getting our act together and working together, now in a concerted period of time, in an effective way that I think has the potential to meet the goal that we set at the beginning of this program. So I think if you go to the next slide, that is it for me. I'm going to sit down or stand here, whatever it is, to take questions from our talented group. Thank you very much. More here, we'll stand and take questions.
Yeah. While they're coming up, I just want to point out that we are a very healthy committee. And that's Larry, who's working, Larry Burnett's working the slides, and Chris Pryor is somewhere. Where you raise your hand? Because they worked hard on this committee. And Hassana was over here, I think. And Joan Rosenthal, I know you were there, and Sandy Frankel. So I really appreciate all the work that they have done, because they are the ones who really made this event. Now, I think it probably worked best if you just keep stepping in when somebody has a question. So I'll start pointing to people, and we'll start right here with Kathleen. And repeat, just a moment, just be sure to repeat the question.
The assets in the Beechwood and Emma neighborhoods, like you said that 80% of the club's smartphone, that's sort of massive. What would be another example of assets in these communities that made you choose them?
So the question was, what were some of the assets that made us choose the Market View, Beechwood, Emma, Bensonhurst neighborhoods as an initial starting point? So we looked at the data-driven analysis we did, looked at a variety of indicators, poverty, vacancy, crime. I think there were 7 positive and 5 negative indicators. On the positive side, in terms of assets, we looked at presence of schools and city facilities, access to transportation, proximity of jobs, and another one, something like that. But yeah, in general, though, we have the public market, which is a fantastic anchor for those neighborhoods. There's also the School 33 and the Ryan Center, which is mentioned as one of the largest elementary schools. It's also connected to a recreation center and a library, a real great asset for the neighborhoods there. And then, we have some exciting, redevelopment taking place on East Main Street and some momentum across the tracks from Village Gate, which is an up-and-coming area.
Okay, question over here? Yes.
Yes, mine is for Mr. Esposito, and if I get a backup for Mr. Fitz too. You generously said recently, and I quote, "Poverty can only be addressed if we collectively do things differently. But if the Finger